Hello and welcome to Mora Voces. In this video, we are going to talk about three notes neumes: the climacus, the scandicus, the parectus, and the torculus. Again, this is a very broad overview. If you want to learn more about three-note neumes, I highly suggest that you refer to Dom Cardine's Gregorian Semiology, or you can reach out to me by email and we can set up a time to talk. All right, let's get started. The climacus is a three-note descending neume. Default, like always, is light, right? As we've spoken before about neumes, we always have to assume that the default movement is light. Another interesting thing to note is that the second note cannot be emphatic by itself, meaning that you can't have the first note light, the second note long, and then the third note light. It never works like that. And you can see that in the repertoire. That's a little too advanced for what we're going to be focusing on in this video, but just something to note. You can see in the bottom left corner, we have an example of what the all-light neume looks like. So you have a virga and two puncti, so virga and subipuncti. And then on the bottom hand right side, we have an example where all three notes are emphatic, or they receive some sort of length. And in those cases, the virga has a different function. In the first, it's a light neume, something like that. And in the second, it would be something along those lines. Again, contextually, could be a whole different thing. But these neumes disprove an idea of proportionalism, because the virga in one case cannot, have a value of 2, and then in the emphatic for a light form, and then in an emphatic form also have a value of 2. Man, not quite ready for T yet. Because that would also mean that it doesn't work. The virga differs in its context, and this proves this, if that makes sense. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me on that, but we're going to keep moving. We're going to look at the scandicus. It is a three-note ascending neume, and as always, the default movement is light. The emphatic form is always found in combination, meaning you are never going to see the emphatic form of the scandicus just on a single syllable. You'll see a solicus though, and I'll address that in a later video, but just know that for now. On the bottom left-hand side, you'll see that we have the default, the light mum, da da da, and then on the left-hand side, it would be something like da da da. You're always headed towards that upper note, da da da, ba da da. A slight difference there, and again, it's going to depend on what's going on contextually. But you can see that on those examples on the right, the one above, we have an emphatic scandicus that is on the syllable alle of alleluia, right? If you're wondering, that is the word alleluia up there. We have a complex neume there. So after the scandicus, you have more neumes on that same syllable. If you look below, you can see on a single syllable there, they use the solicus instead to denote a three-note ascending neume. Right? E and pa are single syllables by themselves. I also forgot to mention, just go back real quick, for the climacus, we can indeed add an epizema on the all-light form so that just that first note receives a bit of broadening or some value. Thought that I would mention that as well, since we saw that in the next video. Sorry about that. Let's keep going. We have our parectus, which is a three-note neume. Default again is up. So for the parectus, up, down, up, right? We start higher, lower, higher. You can also add an epizema to the last note, as we see. This example is taken from Heg Diaz, which is the famous gradual for excuse me, I do that Easter Sunday. So you heard that on that syllable do, Dominus. I went towards that third note and I held it a little bit because it's a point of tension before the Tristofa, whereas with the others are a little more fluid, slightly more fluid. Again, they have different functions. Great. Then last but not least, we have the Torculus, which is a 3-note neume where you start below, then you go above, and then you go below. Down, up, down. Again, default is light. You can see the example there. I have it on the lower left-hand side of Terra Tremuit. You can see there's just default light neumes there. We can also sometimes see a Torculus initio debilis, and I can address that a little later, perhaps in a separate video, or if you're really curious about the Torculus initio debilis, where the first note essentially disappears, and in later manuscripts you see it's disappeared altogether. That's a very special case of the Torculus. So I can either make a special video about that, or if you're really curious, feel free to reach out to me. Because you see those a ton in the repertoire. But for just understanding, a basic understanding of the neumes, the other Torculus that's really important is what a dear friend of mine once called the Torculus twisticus. It's not its official name, but it's fun to say. You often see this at cadential points in the chant. The first note is not really changed, but those the second and the third notes are emphatic. You can see it almost looks like a corkscrew, like someone is taking a rag and rinsing it out, and you can almost feel like the water coming out of that. Right, okay, so one more time, that first note is normal, but then the other two are enlarged, and you're often coming to the end of something. Something like that. Right, those are 3-note neumes. I hope you learned something. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. If you have any questions, you can also just post down in the comment box. I'd be more than happy to connect with you. Thank you.